Scientist. When I was growing up, I always loved science in that super nerdy, look at these bug guts kind of way. I was also raised to understand that helping people is one of the most important things that you can do in your life. So it was completely natural for me to pursue a career studying cancer. After undergrad, I went to Rutgers University to pursue a PhD in endocrinology with a focus in breast cancer. Endocrinology is the study of hormones, these little molecules that float through your body that help your organs to communicate with one another. In breast cancer, hormones like estrogen tell your breast tissue to grow when it shouldn't. When I graduated with my PhD in May of 2016, I could tell you all of the ways that hormones caused your breast tissue to grow and divide, but I really didn't understand anything about what the patient was actually experiencing after a breast cancer diagnosis. All of it changed a few months later on the day before Thanksgiving when I was in the room with my best friend when she heard the words, "You have cancer." We were both 28. Katie's diagnosis came as a complete shock. I, as a research scientist who had a PhD studying breast cancer, felt completely lost. But I had an opportunity to attend chemo with Katie and watch as they injected chemotherapy into her. And it was a surreal experience because a few weeks later, I had used some of those same therapies in the lab where I was doing my postdoc at Georgetown University. The other thing that happens with chemo is it doesn't only kill your cancer cells, it also kills normal cells. And so since this was Katie's second treatment, she had started to have some hair loss. And so we went home later that day and we shaved her head. And as you can see from these pictures, we had some fun with it, but it was still a really hard thing. So I went back to Georgetown, to Washington, D.C., and I really struggled being a distance. So she lives in New Jersey, and having that distance away from my friend was challenging, but it was made easier with FaceTime and having an opportunity to talk with her at night about all of her experiences. I also felt comfort in knowing that as a research scientist, I stood on the shoulders of giants who had done research to find therapies that would eventually deem my friend to be NED, or no evidence of disease. In addition to my experiences with Katie, I also was starting to recognize that the patient's experience was something that I should be including in my research. I had worked with the Georgetown breast cancer advocate the summer prior and had presented some of my work to them. In that presentation, at the end of it, my friend Jamie, who's pictured here, asked me about what the side effects were of the therapy that I was proposing. And I had spent some time researching that, and so I proudly said they're exactly the same as tamoxifen. And Jamie looked me square in the eye and she said, "You know, for some women, taking tamoxifen is like popping a Tic Tac, while for others, the side effects are completely debilitating and they stop taking those therapies." I hadn't. And up until that point, because I had a PhD, and during my PhD, I thought about averages. We looked at one treatment group versus the other, and we averaged them and made comparisons. And I hadn't thought about the individual, the person who was actually experiencing cancer. And again, starting to recognize the value that this can add to my research. Around that time, I also started tweeting with a group called BCSM, or Breast Cancer Social Media. They're a group that gets together virtually every Monday night to talk about topics related to breast cancer. And so it's clinicians, research scientists, and patient advocates who talk about topics ranging from Breast Cancer Awareness Month to what is it like to live as a patient with metastatic breast cancer. In addition to learning about the patient perspective and being able to use that information to help my experiences with Katie, I also started to listen to the advocates to hear what their stories were and what things they wanted to see research to look like. I listened as they talked about Breast Cancer Awareness Month and how sometimes they struggle with it because, as we all know, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, as a general population, we proudly don our pink ribbons in October. For many living with breast cancer, it's not just October and it's not pink, it's their life. I also learned that 1% of all people living with breast cancer are men. I learned about the word survivor and that the way to describe a survivor is probably better from the point of diagnosis than when they're done with their treatments. Because sometimes people don't ever finish their treatments, they're on it for the rest of their lives. And so I'm starting to recognize this value. I'm doing research, I'm incorporating the patient perspective into what I'm doing as I'm applying for grants and that kind of thing. And we get to March of 2017, and I get a call from my brother's best friend, Drew, who's like my older brother when we were growing up. And he called to say that he had been diagnosed with GBM, or glioblastoma, which is a rare but terrible form of brain cancer. And so as fate would have it, my mentor Becca's lab not only studied breast cancer, which is what I did with her at Georgetown, but she also studied brain cancer. And so I was lucky to have somebody to have conversations about what kind of treatments that we should do for Drew. And Becca's advice was clear. GBM is fatal with a 14-month approximate survival, and that he needs to be on a clinical trial as soon as possible. And so the next day, I took a bus up to New Jersey to sit down with our families and discuss about what clinical trial Drew should go on in the future. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. So the next week, I was at the NIH the day before my 29th birthday. I met Drew and his parents to discuss with the team that studied brain cancer there to see what kind of clinical trials they have available. The NIH is a government-funded agency that provides research grants for research scientists doing projects on campuses, but also has research of their own. They also oversee a website called clinicaltrials.gov that compiles all of the clinical trials happening currently in the United States. It is an extremely cumbersome website to navigate, and a lot of times the onus is not necessarily even on the doctor, it's on the families and the patient to find clinical trials. So I thought if we went to the NIH, they could tell us and give us an insider scoop about what clinical trial to put Drew on. But I was sadly mistaken. The team was great, and they had a clinical trial of their own, and so Drew was enrolled. And for the next few weeks and months, Drew and his family drove from New Jersey to Bethesda for treatment. And unfortunately, Drew's therapies failed him, and he passed away in May of 2018, 9 days after his 32nd birthday, and nearly 14 months to the day from his diagnosis. And so with Drew's diagnosis and his passing, I got really angry. Not necessarily at the cancer. I mean, of course I was angry at the cancer, but I was also angry with the system that makes clinical trials so challenging to navigate. I was really frustrated with the lack of research dollars for things like glioblastoma. I was really frustrated with the huge disconnect between the people who were doing research and the people that we were trying to help. And I started to see this pathway towards cancer advocacy and health policy to turn my anger into action. So I met my friend Julia, who's here in the audience today, at a Georgetown graduate student poster session. I tweeted about the event to help to spread awareness about it, and Julia responded asking if she could come to the event after she finished with chemo. Julia is living with metastatic breast cancer, and so she wanted to learn more about the research that was happening at Georgetown. When we met, we had an instant connection, and she invited me to attend the Metastatic Breast Cancer Conference in Baltimore with her a few weeks later. We just met, and then we decided to go to a conference together and stay in the same room a few weeks later. And so it was a great opportunity. So research conferences normally are research scientists talking to research scientists and presenting their work. And this unique conference that's hosted in part by Teresa's Research Foundation offers an opportunity for advocates to sit in on the research presentations. That offers a challenge for the research scientists because they need to be cognizant of the fact that there are advocates in the room and speak to them. And that was not communicated super effectively, and so I sat with the advocates, and I was there to help to be a bridge and to translate some of that science. And in some cases, I was kind of explaining the entire presentation, but we're working on it. And so that unique opportunity started to have me thinking about what other ways can I help to start building these bridges between research scientists and advocates. And at that point, I also talked to advocates that were attending, and the sentiment was the same from all of them, that they wanted to be involved in research, they wanted to have conversations with research scientists, and they wanted to sit in the room while the presentations were going on and be able to actually understand what was happening. And so a few weeks after that, I saw a tweet from a group called National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, or NCCS. And this group works to help spread awareness and information about anybody who's ever been diagnosed with cancer and how their life is automatically going to be different because they've had that cancer diagnosis, and that their treatment will make their health be a little bit different, and we just have to be conscious of that. So they're an advocacy organization. They put out a call for Elevate ambassadors, and Elevate ambassadors are people who take that information and spread it within their own communities. And I thought, what better way than to be an Elevate ambassador in my community, the research scientists, and start bringing advocates in. And so I built a program called the Cancer Training Advocate Program. And I go after trainees because I think they're very impressionable, and I think it's a great opportunity for them to start learning from advocates, but also working on their science communication skills. And so this program just kind of puts trainees and advocates in the same room together. We actually practiced it this summer at Georgetown at Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center. Julie helped me to put it on, and it was a great event. The best thing about this event is that the relationships are bidirectional. The advocates get an opportunity to learn about the research that's going on that could potentially impact their own health or those of their friends, and they get to put their input into the research. And the research trainees get a chance to hear that information, but also work on their science communication skills, which is one of the most valuable things that we as research scientists, I believe, should be doing. And so I'm continuing to build this program. I have a few friends who are going to put it into their individual universities, and I'm hoping that in the future we'll see more people learning from advocates and from people who already have cancer, and they won't have to deal with having such close personal experiences with it to have such an impact on their life. And at this point in my life, I consider myself not only a scientist, but also an advocate. Thank you.